They start calling you names and disrespecting you. And they all are doing that so that you will lose your mind while they laugh at you, right? Maintain your composure. Know who you are. Know whose you are. And understand that, no good thing would the Father start that he will not see to fruition. And if you keep your hand in the Master's hand, there's no telling where you'll end up, but it will be good.
Really got them Rex ain't playing around. When I go get it, stop playing around. Really got them Rex ain't playing around. Black man, white coat, shit, we up right now, yeah. You gotta set you a goal. You gotta accomplish your goal.
What's the craziest thing you've ever seen during your healthcare career?
Oh, man. Dale, I've seen a lot of crazy things, but I would say probably one of my things that I saw particularly was I was out on a fishing pier with my brother, and we were fishing for Spanish mackerel. And on a fishing pier of Spanish mackerel, you cast and, you do this kind of action with a rod, to make the bait do like this in the water.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're up on that pin, people are throwing those things out and you're not paying attention, it can get you. And so on this one particular instance, man, I think my brother was paying attention, but the person that was throwing was kind of inexperienced, and they kind of went sidearm with the bait, and the bait hit my brother on the side of the head right here, and then the hook caught right into his ear.
Mike Tyson on him.
Oh, nah, because it didn't take a bite. It took a stick. And we ended up having to go to the hospital to get that thing pulled. Well, actually, we didn't have to go to the hospital because somebody had some pliers that were able to cut the barb off of the hook, and then we were able to pull it out.
But don't you have to go get all the shots, tetanus, and all that stuff?
Yeah. I tried to convince him of that. But, he wanted to keep fishing.
Right,
Die hard, brother. We're die-hard fishermen.
Hey, there you go. I know you love to fish, man. All right, hey, what is up, fam? It's Dr. Dale. This is the Black Men and White Coats podcast. Man, I'm super excited about today's guest. And I mean, a lot of you guys watching this are going to know who this guy is, right? He's been a mentor to myself and probably a lot of y'all watching this episode, right? Before I do, remind y'all two things real fast. Number one, go get my books, man. Like I said, I'm going to promote some of my own books. My most recent book, Diverse Medicine, I think is the best one I've written. I got 13 of them. That's the best one I've written. And it's an audio book now. An audio book. I wrote the book. I literally went in there now. AI is so crazy. I clicked one button and it turned the whole thing into an audio book, like virtually. Wow. It's crazy. After I paid somebody, it's a lot of work to record an audio book. I did one before. There's a lot of work. So I said, I'm going to pay somebody. This time I paid somebody to do it, and then I found out you can just click a button, whatever. Go get the audio book. Second thing is, remember the Black Men and White Coats documentary. You can watch it right now. Time of this recording for free, right? Members.bmwcevents.com. Members.bmwcevents.com. If you haven't watched the documentary, please go watch this documentary. It features great minds such as the Dr. Cedric Bright, who is today's guest. So, Dr. Cedric Bright, man, I'm not gonna do like all these crazy accolades because he's got way too many, right? He's got way too many. I'd be reading for paragraphs and paragraphs. A lot of amazing things, and we'll talk about some of them during here. One of the great things is past president of the National Medical Association. That's an amazing feat in and of itself in getting that position. But the work that he did during that tenure was absolutely phenomenal. Something that all of us in medicine should be grateful for, and say thank you to Dr. Bright for the work he's done there. Dr. Bright, I don't want to butcher your current role. So your current role, Associate Dean.
So Senior Associate Dean for Admissions here at the Brody School of Medicine at East Carolina University.
Senior Associate Dean of Admissions, ECU, East Carolina University, Brody School of Medicine. And we'll go into it. Let's just go into the story. I was going to start telling about how we met and stuff like that, but we'll go into and we'll get to that as we talk about the story. All right. The first thing I want to ask you before we kind of get into your official story all the way back to your childhood, the first thing I want to ask you is, what was your welcome to medicine moment? Meaning when you got that long white coat and you said, "Hey, I'm a doctor." What was your welcome to medicine moment?
Great question. I guess really, Dale, my welcome to medicine moment was probably, as I was trying to get my first job. And I went into the interview and I walked in and I said, "Hello, I'm Dr. Bright." The guy said, "Hey, good to meet you, Dr. Black. Have a seat." I was like, okay. A couple of minutes later. So, Dr. Black, tell me about, okay. So then a few minutes later, he said, so Dr. Black, tell me about, I said, excuse me, my name is Dr. Bright. And you keep calling me Dr. Black. Any reason why that might be? Was the answer, right? And then I don't know why I'm calling you. I said, because you didn't expect me to be.
And
I got the job. I got the job.
did you take the job?
And I took the job because I needed one.
When was this in your career? Was this at what time?
My first job after my residency program was running an outpatient clinic as a clinical site director.
That's crazy. I mean, you would think that he would have read the application, got over all that before he sat down with you. But like you said, that subconscious was getting to him.
Well, the thing about it, Dale, if you read my resume, there was nothing on that said I was black except for Omega Psi Phi.
He probably don't know what that is. If he's not black, he probably doesn't know what that is.
Yeah, I went to a boarding high school. I went to Brown. I went back to Carolina. I went back to Brown and did my training. My first name is Cedric. Yeah, he's kind of like, oh, wow. That's not who I was expecting to walk in the door.
Man.
But that's okay, though. You know, that's okay. I can forgive him because he didn't know. He was using all his social cues to try to figure out who was going to walk through the door, and I messed him up.
That's sad. I mean, I understand why you say you can forgive him, but it's a sad reality as to the expectations that people have for us. So, you know,
I don't think it's so much a sad reality of what they have for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a reflection of what they have been taught themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And what they have in their mindset of what a person like us should be doing. And then when we break that stereotype, like you and me, and we walk in places into the boardrooms and to the leadership offices, and they're just like, oh, okay. But that's why we got to do it, right? Because the more times that you and I walk into those spaces, and all the rest of you brothers and sisters out there, every time we walk into those spaces, we start changing perspectives and changing realities. We start moving people away from that supremacist stance to one of a holistic stance. Because if the only place you have always been is in a supremacist environment, that's all you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you hate other people. It's just that you just think that we the best in the world.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that's kind of one of those things I've been kind of mulling over in my brain lately.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense. And you mentioned that people like you and I and a lot of other folks need to kind of get in these rooms. We do, and I was thinking about this earlier on today. But it's so much work. I'm saying we still have to do it, but it's like so much work, the amount of effort, the time, the energy it takes to do your day-to-day job. You know, the tax, right? The minority tax or whatever. The amount of time it takes for you to do your day-to-day job, but know, hey, like I need to get in that room so people don't have this perspective of us because that's all they know. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts around that? Because I come to these times where I'm like, man, my schedule's so busy, I've got to drop something, but then you feel guilty when you want to drop something because you don't want to take that representation out of that group, you know?
Nah, I feel you on that. And I guess, Dale, you know, and I'm at that point again. I mean, it seems like every year I'm at that point somewhere in the year where I'm like, I'm just overextended.
I feel like you're probably always at that point. I'd be willing to bet that you're always at that point.
But what you have to do is you start making those decisions about what's most important. And the way that I do that is I kind of have my own code of morals. And I'll look at the aspect of what this is asking me to do and how does it reflect upon my morals. Like, you know, does this serve the kingdom? Number one. Is this something that improves life for all people, right? Not just some people, but for all people. Because we all know a rising tide lifts all boats, but people got to be in a boat. Otherwise, it drowns them. Right?
I love how you always throwing random things on. Like you always find you got so many sayings, man. I've heard that saying so many times, but I've never heard the end of it. People got to be in a boat. You always find a ways to throw something extra on and say that it just adds a whole lot of more meaning to it. Man, I love it.
Yeah, but that's it. You got to think about it from those perspectives and weigh those things and think about, what's my trajectory? Where am I going to next? Where do I think God is trying to lead me? And there's this follow that. If it follows that, okay, I keep this. But if I've now pivoted away from the meaning of something and it's no longer that poignant in my life, then I have what I do is try to find somebody else to take my place, to take that over that role.
Let me
I
ask you
try
this.
to groom people and always have a succession plan as I'm going through things.
Let me ask you this. So, like, let's say if you're, for example, on an admissions committee, and then you're like, man, I'm overextended. I've got to get off this committee. And you want to recommend somebody to take your spot, or you groom somebody. When you're recommending somebody to take your spot, are you specifically thinking of getting somebody else with your similar mindset, or getting somebody else who looks like you, something of that effect? Is that part of your process? Because, and I'm kind of going through that right now with some things that, my plate is just full, and I'm starting to think, okay, if I do have to drop some things, like I'm on one board, I already told him I won't be able to come back to this board. I'm thinking about, okay, who do I need to put up in my spot, things of that sort. Do you try to get people with a similar mindset to yours, or do you feel as though that's kind of like tampering and biasing the process, of getting the right next person in there?
That's a great question, and I'm smiling because I kind of can see both sides of the equation. On one part of it, what I do is I try to assess what's missing, and then I try to find somebody that would be that missing part. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
And if I'm the only one that has the only voice that's different in that room, then I'm going to try to find somebody that's similar to me, but obviously they can't be a clone, but you do want to have somebody that's had some similar experiences and has a perspective that they can, represent well.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer. Take a moment to think about what's missing and make sure you can get that right person to fill that void and add appropriate value into the group. Let's rewind back to your childhood. I mean, some of the stuff I would love to talk to you about, and that's from me. I've known you for, 15 plus, around 15 years or so now, probably. I think when I started residency, 2010.
It's been longer than that.
Yeah, that's true. I've probably known you longer than that, but that's probably when I got closer to you, at least. But I want to take it further back than that, all the way back to your childhood, right? So, you've accomplished a lot in your career. And, for a parent or even a student kind of watching this episode, you're going to think, okay, if I want to accomplish these types of things, what type of student, what type of person, what kind of child was Cedric Bright when he was, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old? So what were you? What kind of kid were you?
Man, I was a kid badly in need of medications. I'm serious, man. I'm ADHD. I had trouble paying attention in class. I was always getting into trouble because if class was slow, I was making paper airplanes and trying to fly them, clandestinely. How do you fly a paper airplane in the middle of class clandestinely? You don't. But I'm like, oh, I can get away with this. Nah, man. And unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, I had parents who were very much engaged. Both of my parents were public school teachers. So when they would get that call from the principal's office, I just knew to go ahead and get my tail ready because I was going to get at least 2 whippings when I got home.
Is that one for me? Is that one from each parent?
Yep. Yep. And if my grandparents picked me up, I might have even got one from them too.
Oh man.
So, it's just one of those things. My parents were very good about setting expectations for me as a child. And they talked about, the importance of education as teachers. They started my brother and I reading early, back in the day. We had encyclopedias, Dale.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know if you know what encyclopedias are.
Oh yeah, man. I had a big old bookshelf growing up. Yeah.
Okay, so I had that big old bookshelf of World Book encyclopedias. Yeah. That was my bathroom reading, and stuff like that, and so growing up, that was the kind of stuff that they instilled in me, and so I got to this place where I wanted to be competitive, and my brother was very good in his classes, and I was like, I'm not gonna let my brother outshine me. So we both became very competitive to do well academically, and Fortunately for both of us, it did well for us to be able to get placement into some AP courses when I was younger, and then to get into a private boarding school that during my high school time. And then subsequently, I went to Brown University. My brother went to NC State, but he should have gone to Brown because he got into Brown too. But he decided he wanted to go where his girlfriend was at the time, so he went to NC State.
He was
He's
trying to.
happy this week. He's happy this week
I
that
was about
NC
to say.
State was in the Final Four.
I
Both
was
of
about
the
to say.
teams, but unfortunately, they didn't get any further than the Final Four. They didn't get to the championship.
Nah, man. Unfortunately, Duke didn't get further. Get further than what they make Elite Eight or something like that.
I didn't say nothing to you about that, though.
You going for Carolina, huh? You're Carolina at heart.
Yeah, well, my life is odd, Dale. I grew up as an NC State fan.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to Carolina Med School, I switched over to Carolina. And I'd never been a Duke fan until I got to Duke for my as an attending. And so I have this hierarchy in life. I have a Carolina first, I got State second, and Duke is third. And so as long as they're not playing against each other, I root for all of them. But when they start playing against each other, I do have a little bit of a hierarchy.
I thought you were gonna put Duke second. I didn't realize the State part. Why State?
I grew up in the era of Monty Towell, David Thompson, Tom Burleson when they won the championship back in 1974. And that was great basketball back in the day because only one team from the ACC would go to the NCAA, and there was only like 16 teams in the NCAA. So if you didn't win your conference title, you could not go. And Maryland and NC State used to have just these battles back in the day because they were really truly the two best teams in the nation. And unfortunately, only one team could go to the tournament. And one year Maryland went all the way to the Final Four. Then next year State went and won the whole shebang.
And where'd you grow up? What city did you grow up?
I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Dale.
Okay.
So in
you
the
got no love for Wake Forest.
So Wake Forest is what we call Switzerland. Nobody hates them, but nobody is really enamored by them. Wake Forest was a program that was kind of on the fringes of the ACC, and they had good teams every now and then with Skip Brown and Rod Griffith back in the day, Leroy McDonald, who all of those guys came over to my school when I was in the middle school and did some of the student teaching and stuff like that. But nah, bruh. At first, I was an ABC fan, anybody but Carolina, which is kind of how I became a State fan.
Man, wow,
But
wow.
we have digressed a long way, brother.
We have one last thing on the topic. Before I got to North Carolina, I didn't realize that people in Carolina call North Carolina just Carolina. Like I remember when I got there, I was like, why are they calling it Carolina? There's a South Carolina too. Like, why is it just Carolina? And now I'm used to it, right? Because I lived there for a little bit, but. Like it sounded so strange. So to the listeners, when he's saying Carolina, he's talking about the University of North Carolina, the bad blue, the light blue. That's what he's talking about. All right. All right. You said something. I want to jump back. You mentioned boarding school. When you went to boarding school, tell me about that experience. Were you away from home or were you home commuting to boarding school?
I was away from home. I take a Greyhound bus at the end of August up to Alexandria, Virginia. It was called the Episcopal High School of Alexandria, Virginia. And I would be up there until Thanksgiving when I could get a bus and come back home. Or not Thanksgiving, but then Christmas, come home for Christmas break. And then go back up in January and be up there until it was time to come home.
And you're 16, 17?
So I was 16, 17, no, 15. 16 and 17. I went there in the 10th grade, and I tried out for varsity basketball, Dale. And I got cut, and I was so mad. I was so mad because I was killing people. I was already 6'2" at that particular time. But what so happened was that the coach said, "I'm not going to let you play varsity because you're only 15, and you can go play on a juniors team and get to run the full time." As opposed to just sitting on the bench up here at the varsity.
Yeah,
so I ended
fair.
up playing juniors for a year, and then I moved up to the varsity and played 2 years of varsity basketball. But the thing about that boarding school is that I was number 17. The school was established in 1838. It was a Southern aristocratic boarding school.
Number
Not
17
only
meaning the 17th black person. Is that what you mean?
the 17th black person in that school's history. And it was tough. It was really tough, Dale, from the perspective of being away from home. But fortuitously, I had my older brother, and my older brother didn't take no mess. My brother would not take any mess, and so I got there, and folks were like, "Don't mess with him, because his brother is crazy." And so, fortunately, I didn't have that. I didn't have a lot of things happen to me. I had a lot of name calling. I had my books got graffiti all over them with the N word and this, that, and the other.
How did you deal with that?
Well, Dale, initially I used to lose my mind every time I saw it, every time I got it, every time I heard it. And I would be like, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then after a while, I started noticing that every time I did that, folks were sitting there pointing at me and laughing, right? So I realized they were all doing that just to get a rise out of me.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, look, let me take back my power, and I'm going to stop reacting to it. And so finally it started happening, and I was like, really? That's all you got? And they couldn't laugh. It didn't give them any pleasure. So next thing I know, it quit. It stopped. Now, ironically, 35 years later, I'm back at my 35th reunion. And I had some of those very folks that used to call me that all the time come up to me and apologize to me about how they treated me while I was at that school. And it touched me. It touched me. In life, we talk about this aspect of forgiveness, right? Mm-hmm. And forgiveness is so powerful. Forgiveness is not just for the person that offends you, but it's for yourself, right? Because if you forgive the person, but don't forgive yourself for being in that position since that person could use you in that manner, it starts to build up in you and build up to you. And that's what's part of that whole aspect of allostatic load, right? And epigenetics and how those things, when you don't forgive yourself, it builds up inside of you and it causes more inflammation in your body and raises your blood pressure and makes you more prone for diabetes. But when you learn how to forgive yourself, it takes that pain away from you. It takes that hurt away from you. It allows for you to recalibrate yourself, right? And that was so important to me because, I had forgiven them a long time ago, but it had eaten at them for so long that when they finally saw me after 35 years, they felt they needed to apologize to me. So I know they were looking for forgiveness. And so I gave it to them. I'd already forgiven them, but they were asking for it, so I gave it to them. And now, Dale, I'm on the board for that high school.
I love the spin you put on that, right? Because when you started telling about how you saw them at your 35th, reunion, some people might have been thinking like, oh, it's payback time now, that type of thing, right? And I'm not gonna lie, first thing that came to my mind is, oh, is he gonna tell a payback type of story? Not that I was looking forward to that, but that's the first thing that kind of comes to mind. But rather than a payback story, you're telling a story of love, a story of forgiveness, a story of, what I consider Christ-like, opening your arms, welcoming, that type of story. I love that. That's important. One thing that I'm seeing, as I'm interviewing folks in this Black Men and White Coats podcast, I'm seeing how big of a deal this mental health, this forgiveness. I interviewed Dr. Ingram just the other day recently again, and we talked about the same thing. So, Tony, my oldest son, Tony, he had some issues where some kids were calling him the N-word and his friends the N-word recently. So, we're kind of teaching him kind of how to go through this. And I asked Dr. Ingram the same question, and he had, similar answer to kind of what you mentioned. And, one thing he also said was, he's like, I tell people, they called you the N-word twice. I'm like, imagine going to school where they're using it all day, every day towards you, right? And you really learning how to deal with that and not let the emotions get to you. But I'm learning more and more, and to me, it's awesome how I'm seeing more and more Black men kind of talking about, the mental aspects of things and being, vulnerable and forgiving and things of that sort. Understanding exactly what you just said, it's more of a weight on us if we're not open to forgive people, excuse me, and actually consider, not always try to be so, stoic and John Henry and things of that sort,
John Henry is a good one.
Yeah, I love that. Let me come back to just something else I'm thinking about. I don't know how much you want to go into this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. You mentioned your parents, the belt, all right, the art of the belt. I was actually in Memphis yesterday. We had our sixth annual Black Men and White Coats Youth Summit in Memphis, and one of the doctors up there, He made a joke about, you know, he made a joke about the belts also, pretty much how, and his dad was there. It was really cool. His dad was there, older gentleman, and, you know, everybody laughed about the joke. But essentially saying, you know, he got the belt growing up, and that was part of helping him out. You got the belt growing up. I got the belt growing up, right? I don't think most kids get the belt anymore. And then, so that's one thing you said. The other thing you mentioned, which I thought was fascinating, and my kids don't get the belt, right? But something that's is different from the way I grew up, right? You know, they got spankings when they were younger now, don't get me wrong, but they don't get the belt. And then you mentioned having an encyclopedia growing up. You know, I'm thinking I didn't have the internet either. I know you didn't have the internet. I didn't have the internet, but I did have that big encyclopedia bookshelf. And I either interviewed somebody or I spoke to somebody else recently who also was talking about how they had the Encyclopedia Britannica, and that's what they did. So I'm thinking the difference between the way kids are raised nowadays compared to the way I was raised and the way you were raised was probably even different than the way I was raised. What do you think about that? You know, what are your general thoughts about parenting today versus parenting back in the day, and the product that it's yielding at the end of the day for society?
Great question, Dale.
That was a good one, I think. That was a good one.
So, you know, when I think about that, Dale, I guess the question becomes, how do we define parenting?
Okay.
Right? You know, if parenting back in my day, my parents weren't my friend. My parents were my parents. My parents were trying to ensure that I got what I needed to get. Now, they loved me. They took care of me. They made sure that I felt that I belonged, that I was included, and that I was valued, right? But there were rights and wrongs in life. And if you crossed that path of wrong, you paid the price, right? And it was a corporal price that you paid, you know? It wasn't until I was too big for them to whoop that they started then taking away, you know, my allowance, or taking away my time on listening to the radio, or something of that nature, right? I'll be honest with you, man. There was something about that physical punishment that really made me not want to have that anymore. That really said, when my parents said something the first time, I was going to get up and do it, right? And it wasn't like it was never excessive. It was never, you know, for no reason. There was always I always knew the reason for why I was getting it. Okay. And so, which made me learn how to control my ADHD, because I they didn't have medications back then. I just had to figure out how to calm my happy butt down, you know? And so, you know, I had to learn my own ways to calm myself and to keep myself, such that I didn't get in trouble. But, you know, my parents weren't necessarily my friends. And my parents' friends were more friends to me than my parents were. Okay? And so they made sure to raise me as a child, which means they helped me to understand how the world was going to view me. They helped me to understand what my value may be into the world compared to what my value is at home. They helped me to understand who I am, and more importantly, whose I am, giving me that foundation of Christ. And so in doing all of that, that helped to put me in a position that I was able to be successful, because I had pretty much everything in place beyond my own effort. Because that was the one thing they could not make me do. I had to be motivated to do it myself. Fast forward now, and I'm an older father. I got married at 40. I had a son at 44. He is now 16 going on 17.
Goodness gracious. Wow.
And yeah, I know, man. He wants to be taller than me so bad, but it still ain't happening.
How tall is he?
Right here.
And you're 6'6", right? How tall are you? 6'5"?
I'm about 6'5".
Okay.
Yeah, so he's right there. But you know, it's a different, you know, initially I tried to raise him like I was being raised back in the day, you know, but by the time he got to be about 7, 8 years old, I realized that wasn't going to be the way it was going to work. And so what I have to do now, and what I've been doing, is I spend a lot of time talking to him. and just, helping them understand, just like my parents helped me understand where the guide rails were. I'm trying to help him understand the guide rails. And I'm also helping him try to understand what the resources are for him to be as successful as he can be, right? Because one of the issues that we often run into is we just think we got to do everything on our own. And that's not true. There's so many resources out here that we can take advantage of that will help to put us in a different position, to help us to elevate our position. If we'll just, look outside of ourselves and outside of our surrounding environments. But that also means that you need to be willing sometimes to be the only one.
Yeah.
And be okay with that. Now, when you know who you are and whose you are, you can be the only one. Because no matter what they call you, it doesn't matter what they call you. It matters what you answer to.
Amen. I love it. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I coach my kids basketball, and I was talking to one of the parents the other day, and he was talking about this whole idea of punishment and things of that sort. And one thing I'm always clear to tell my child, I said, I don't punish you, I discipline you. I said there's a difference. Punishment is meant to inflict harm, pain, almost like a retribution, payback type of thing. Discipline is meant for correction. So I was telling my child, I said, God disciplines his children. The Bible doesn't say, I can't think of a single time the Bible says God punishes his children, right? He disciplines his children. There's going to be the wrath of God, and that's punishment for those who, otherwise, but he disciplines.
Right.
So I'm always clear to tell my kid that. But I think about this a lot, right? We travel the country, we do these summits, and I'm just looking at all the kids and parents are, they have so many questions and trying to think about the best way to resource, to provide resources and help kids. But, and I'm sure there's tons of courses out there, but just like modern day discipline strategies, that's something I'm probably going to take a deeper delve into, because my kids now, they definitely treat me more like friends than it's more of a friendship. It's parent, they know that reverence is there, but there's a big friendship component to it that I didn't necessarily have with my parents until I got older. Now that I'm older,
right.
The friendship is there. But anyways, I thought that was fascinating when you were telling about your upbringing. So when did you first decide that medicine would be the career for you?
Dale, I think I've told you the story before. My original thought of wanting to become a doctor occurred when I was about 4 years old. Remember, I told you that my parents were school teachers, and so they had brought home this series of books about this is what a doctor does, this is what a nurse does, with engineer, fireman. And so my brother and I were reading those books, and my brother said, well, Cedric, I think when I grow up, I want to become an engineer. And I said, that's cool, Andre. I think when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. Fast forward 20, 25 years, I was a doctor. He was an engineer. So it's something about giving young children an expectation or giving them a dream and then helping them to make it come to fruition. I can promise you, Dale, there were a lot of off-ramps I could have taken. There were a lot of off-ramps. But for some reason, God just kept pushing me down the road and saying, no, that ain't for you. Close that door. Shut that window. So I had to follow through.
That's awesome. And how much older is your brother than you?
20 months.
20 months. So that's cool. So it reminds me of my brother, Daniel, and I. He's a little bit over 2 years older than I am. I think about how it sounds like to me like your older brother was, solid, academic, all around, just a solid guy is what it sounds like. And it was kind of there to set that extra example for you. And I had that in my own brother as well, just thinking for parents, right? If, even if you don't have your child, your son or daughter doesn't have an older sibling, just the idea of getting them around the right people from a young age, giving them around a solid foundation of peers who are just like-minded. It's got to be critical for success.
It is critical to success. And I look at my colleagues that didn't have all that, who were still able to make it despite that. Right? And I say to myself, man, I ain't got nothing I could complain about, because at least, I know that where I came from, and look how much they overcame to get to the same place. And so, it's an interesting dichotomy when you sit back and you say, okay, now I'm probably, if there were 10 guys like me and they were all raised in the same environment, it's a possibility that 7 of them might have made it, right? But you think about the 10 guys that were raised in the opposite environment, in which
Yeah.
3 of them made it, okay? And you say to yourself, wow. It's kind of like the rose in the concrete. You don't ask how, I don't ask why, you say how, right? And so that's my little Tupac reference.
Concrete rose. I mean, while we're kind of there, I'm going to flip it to your senior associate dean of admissions hat right here. When you're looking at these kids' applications, right, and you got the MCAT score, and everybody wants to see the high MCATs, and everybody wants to see the high grades, yada yada yada. You're right now alluding to something that's harder to grasp, right? That's harder to review on an application. So, cool thing about this podcast is we got a lot of different age groups listening to this podcast, right? So this one is for parents, but maybe more specifically for that kid, that pre-medical student who is one of those, you just mentioned 10 kids from the opposite environment for you, one of the 3 that makes it. Maybe we're talking to that kid right there. What things in their application, what things in their life, their background, are you looking at to say, hey, even though your grades aren't as good, your MCAT might not be as, may or may not, some of them will have phenomenal MCAT. So one thing I hate doing is making it seem like you can't have great life experiences and good grades, right? Some people do stellar all across the board, but I'm just talking about that specific kid who maybe doesn't have the highest MCAT, maybe doesn't have the highest GPA, but they have something else that's special. How do you evaluate for that candidate to find that candidate?
Oh, yeah, that's all about, looking for the diamonds in the rough. You got to kind of have in mind somebody that that has done that, and you think about the characteristics that they had, and you start looking for it in other people. Unfortunately, I've been at this game a little while now. Don't let the gray hair fool you. I didn't do admissions at Duke, but in my 13 years while I was there, I spent a lot of time working with a lot of quality people like yourself, right? And we had a lot of Black residents that came through there, Black and brown folks that came through our residency programs back in those days, and I saw the characteristics of y'all as successful people. So when I transitioned from y'all and went over to Duke, over to Carolina, and started working in admissions there, I was looking for y'all. Being honest with you, I was looking for y'all. And then as I've had the success there, now I'm down here at ECU, and now I'm looking for folks that I saw that were successful then, because it's kind of like a generation has changed. There's a different kind of folks that I'm looking at now that are different than the students that I was looking at previously. And so I have to look for that. And so what I'm talking about is, if you don't have the best GPA, well, at least let's say that you at least got a GPA that's doing this. You came in from a poor performing high school and you scored low your freshman year, but your sophomore year, you came up a little bit. Your junior year, you came up some more. By your senior year, you're kicking it, okay? I'm looking for that, right? And even if your total GPA is now a 3.5, but you started at a 2.8, and you worked your way up to now having a 3.5, okay, that's good. That's not the top GPA, but at least you showed me that you've grown over time, okay?
Take that momentum with you into medical school.
That's correct, right? And then the other thing is folks need to understand that most folks aren't ready coming out of undergraduate anymore. Most folks, if you really want to get yourself to the best place that you can be, taking a couple of years off after you graduate from college to work on getting the clinical experiences, getting your hands-on clinical experiences and more volunteerism, and to say that your grades weren't the best, you take a master's program that you can get financial aid for, as opposed to a post-bac program where you got to pay out of your pocket. Okay. That allow you to then improve your academics and, more importantly, sometimes improve your MCAT score as well. So it doesn't have to be a straight line. There's no one path to medicine anymore, Dale. And that really wasn't when I was coming along, but that's what everybody told you. And if you weren't right on that path, right on time, you may as well forget it. And that's just such a lie. That's what so many of us get lost, Dale, because folks tell them to forget it when there's so many other aspects in different ways that they can get there.
I just interviewed we'll put his episode out soon. I just interviewed Antonio Patterson. I don't know if you know him. Antonio Patterson, he went the 50-year-old second-year med student. I just interviewed him and talk about having a different path to get to where you're at, right?
Yeah.
Different path. Let me ask
That's
you.
not the guy that was the auto mechanic or something like that.
No, that's Carl. That's Carl
That's
Lambie.
Carl. That's the other guy. Okay.
We interviewed him too. So, but Carl's came out a while ago. Antonio's will come out very soon. Great story, also. I mean, he's got a really interesting story. They both do. So you just mentioned something really fascinating. You just mentioned that folks nowadays aren't as prepared coming out of undergrad. What do you mean by that statement exactly? They're not, they need more time to develop, mature, I guess, but coming out of undergrad, they're not as ready as they used to be. What exactly do you mean by that?
So what I'm saying really, Dale, is there used to not be the metric of choice for everybody was the MCAT score and the GPA. Those were the two metrics that everybody looked at. But then we realized that some of the folks with the highest GPAs and the highest MCAT scores could not take care of a patient if their life depended on it. And so we started realizing there's more to being a physician than these numbers, which is why I'm not even going to get to that discussion today. I'm going to stay away from it. And so, when you come to the understanding of that and you start looking at people holistically, you start realizing that, some of these kids are still quite immature coming out of college. And they need a little bit more time to be able to handle the rigors and the discipline of being a medical student, right? Because you got to be willing to sacrifice a whole lot of personal time to take care of your academics. You're going to start your clinical rotations and you're going to have no personal time. Family ain't going to see you for a whole year. You got to help them to understand it's not that you don't love them anymore, and it's not that you don't want to be there, but you have a responsibility to be on the wards, take care of people on a Saturday. I can't come home. I can't call out. I can't play sick. I'm a doctor. Can't play sick. Okay? And so that's a whole different perspective. It's the difference between a job and a profession, right? And a job, 9 to 5, you shut the door, you go home, you don't think about it not one bit. But when you become a profession like a doctor and you walk into the grocery store and you think you're off, somebody walk up to you, Dr. Bright, what's this on my wrist? My back keeps hurting when I do this or I do that. Or my uncle said that he has this going on. What's all that mean? You're on 24/7, 365.
Oh, yeah.
That's a profession, okay? And you got to understand that means also you can't do what you want to do all the time. I can't go out and hang out with my boys and get drunk like we used to when I was like in college or high school, right? I'm now a professional.
College kiddos don't drink. College.
Yeah.
Well, disclaimer.
When I was in high school, the age was 18, and I was 18.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, it used to be drinking age was 18.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's how old I am.
How wise you are.
And they moved the age up. But the bottom line on that is that your life is not your own, and that when you become a professional, you have to be on. You have to be on at all times, and that's some things folks just sometimes can't handle. They just want to be out. They just want to be out. And being out one time at the wrong place that somebody records, especially nowadays, you lose your medical license. And you lose your medical license, you a doctor with no ability to be a doctor.
Yeah. I remember when I was in college, we played a lot of basketball, just pickup. One of my, I don't know if you ever met Steve, one of my best friends and I, we would always play pickup ball, and stuff happens, right? Little scuffles and things of that sort. And I was like, hey, look, we can't be part of this at all, man. All it takes is one thing gone wrong, and that's it. Get kicked out of med school, all this. So get to that point where you gotta kind of mature about some of those things. Let me ask you, what would you say was the most difficult part or the most difficult thing that may have happened to you on your journey to getting to where you are today?
Sophomore year, brother. So sophomore year, I had pledged to fraternity. Right there, somewhere on my chest. And I came back my sophomore year and I started acting that fraternity. And my grades just, and I didn't think about it until it was at the end of that semester. So I went to my pre-med advisor. He was like, "Well, listen, Cedric, you really bombed it this year. And, you didn't really your GPA was good, but it wasn't great previously. So now you're kind of in a hole. If you can show this type of improvement going forward, you got a chance to go to medical school, but you're gonna have to really show a big improvement." And so that's why I always talk about, if y'all show me this, I'm gonna look for you, right? Because that's me.
You've been there, yeah.
And so I had to really pull it together and get my act in order and start actually studying, and rather than just kind of hanging out and being a mega all the time and enjoying the fruits of that labor. And it's just a matter of maturing. It's a matter of maturing. I mean, because I told you I went to a boarding school. I did tell you it was an all boarding school.
Oh, so you got to college in there.
I wasn't around any females in high school. So when I got to college, that was my first time being around females.
Yeah.
And after I pledged that fraternity, those females started looking at me. That's why I forgot what to do with them books. Just being honest.
Oh, no, definitely understand that. What would you tell a young college student who's like you, who is considering pledging right now? Because that's a very common thing, right? People want to go to college, they pre-med, but they want to pledge also. What advice would you give them along that journey while they're pledging, etc.?
Well, make sure you look for a fraternity that has brothers in it that are responsible brothers. Because if the fraternity is a bunch of knuckleheads and all they do is get in trouble and they ain't going to classes and they ain't doing well in school, you don't need that. You don't need that. You can wait. You can do that in grad school. You can do that after you graduate from college and go get that. You need to take care of the business that you need to take care of it while you're there. You got to make hay while the sun is shining, right? And so that's one thing I would say. The second thing is Dale, when I was online, my GPA went up because we had study hall.
Yeah.
And they couldn't mess with us for 2.5 hours during study hall. So for me, that was great. But I forgot all those lessons the next semester after I went over. And I didn't put myself in a study hall anymore. And that's where I lost my discipline. And so, it's important to understand the camaraderie of fraternities and all of that. But I think that you need to make sure that you uphold the what we call cardinal principles, which is one of them is scholarship. And so we got to make sure that we maintain that.
Let me ask you this. So I remember when I started Black Men and White Coats. I remember it was 2013, and by then you'd been mentoring me already, right? I remember I see you at the Durham VA all the time in the hallways and pick your brain about all sorts of stuff. But it was 2013, and Neve put out that little report thingy, the first, not the big one that you co-authored, but the little deal he put out before that. And I saw it or whatever. My brother, I don't know if you remember Simon, and we all did a little video, we put it online, and it started getting a little bit of buzz around there. And that was the first Black Men and White Coats thing. And I remember I was driving out Irwin, right in front of the hospital. I was driving out Irwin, and I got a call from you. You're like, Dale, this is, that's what the video is great. This is what we need to be trying to get people to do, whatever. And you were so encouraging and motivating to that idea. I remember I said something to the effect of, well, whatever, just something I felt like doing. And, it's kind of like, well, that was it, just trying to get people to talk and whatever. And you said something that has turned out to be somewhat true. You said some, I forget the exact words, but something to the effect of like, Dale, no, you've got to stick with this, take it, run with it. Like this you said something like, you never know, this might be the foundation that you're able to do a lot of great work, build your part of your career on, and actually go out there and have tons of impact. So you really gave me that early motivation, that early encouragement to not just make this a one-off thing, but to take it and build upon it and go out and do something with it. And of course, you mentored me all these years, and Diverse Medicine Board and the film and a billion things. Oh, matter of fact, I'm going to pause and say one of the most important things you did for me really fast. I remember when I was working, I had the website. I was pre-med-star initially, then we turned into Diverse Medicine. And I was emailing like advisors and students, and we're trying to start getting students onto our site and help students across the country out. And And then some advisors started like bad mouthing me on some listserv that I didn't have access to this listserv, and they were saying something like, "Who's this Dale guy?" I forgot what they said, but pretty much saying like, "We don't know this stuff. Why is he reaching out to the students?" It's almost as if I was getting blackballed by advisors across the country. And probably one of the best things I remember somebody doing for me. First of all, I didn't know about it. You told me about it. I didn't know about it till you told me, because I guess you were on the list or somebody was on the list. So you told me about it first of all, and then you actually wrote a reply letter and sent it out to everybody that listserv back, kind of defending me and saying things of that sort. So I know I've told you thank you probably, but I'm going to publicly say thank you again. And to the listeners, just understanding the significance of having somebody who you look up to, who you respect, who's mentored you, who sponsored you, right, in your corner to back you up, because that could have been the one thing that made me just stop, right? Because I remember I was down when I saw that bothered me a lot, just thinking like, because I was younger and I wasn't very far into, I hadn't done too much yet, right? So I didn't understand the idea of, hey, you got to be strong, and these now it'll bounce off me. But back then I wasn't at that point, right? And to have you come up behind me and support me and get my back and give me that strength and that encouragement and stand up for me. Like without that Black Men in White coach, these summers, none of that stuff probably is around anymore, right? So thank you for that. And then the question there for both of these would be, what makes you, because you're busy on your own, you're a doctor, you have all these leadership roles. I think at that point in time, you were doing your dean work at UNC already, I think at that point in time.
And so, I think I was president of NMA.
President of NMA, yeah, and probably a million other things you're doing at the same time, probably. What gives you the energy, the time, the hearts to say, I'm going to stop my busy schedule to do these things? I know it's not just for me, because I know a million people who've benefited from you also. So how do you do that, right? And the heart comes from it and things of that sort, like just how, why, where?
Well, that's an easy. Thanks. First off, thanks, Dale. That's. I've always just done, Dale. It's not been a matter of oftentimes really thinking about it. If it's in the guardrails of what I think is important in life, I always make time for it. And the honest truth is, I still have not medicated for my ADHD. And so what happens is these things come in and a request happens. I stop whatever it is I'm doing. I take care of that. And then I'm able to go back and focus on what I was doing. Because if I try to finish what I'm doing and I have that on my mind, I become distracted and I'm not able to really focus. So I sometimes let my tangents or my squirrels, as my staff likes to say, I'm a squirrely guy. I let my squirrels take me away, and then I'm able to come back and focus on the other things that I was working on. But I just think it's important. Representation is so important because, when I came through medical school, I had this guy named Mr. Larry Keith. And Mr. Larry Keith was pretty much everything to every Black kid who went to UNC medical school at that time, because that's all we had. He was the only person that was bold enough, bad enough to say no to some of these people that were in our administration and say, y'all must be losing your ever cotton picking mind by not picking these students who are great students and they're going to be great leaders. He stood out on a limb for us. I'm just doing what I was taught. I'm standing out on that limb. I'm standing on his shoulders. Like you stand on my shoulders. Like you prepared somebody to stand on your shoulders. Like they're going to prepare their shoulders for somebody else to stand on. That's the African tradition, brother. Every time we climb, we reach behind. That's the only way to get ahead.
Man, I'm giving you flowers now, and again, just say thank you. Just certain people. For me, there've been a few people who have been key. First, God, my wife, my parents, siblings, of course, all those things, and then you get into the realm of mentorship. You, Dr. Ingram, Byron Cryer, in the Bay, like certain people.
Please tell Byron I said hello.
I just interviewed him. I just put his episode out actually, so you can check his out too. But
okay.
We'll do definitely will do. But And with just certain people who, like you said, are just kind of giants, who've been giants for me. I know there's more out there, but you guys have been giants for me. And I want to, say it publicly because people, I'm not going to lie, I get a lot of credit with Black Men and White Coats. Like people come up to me all saying, thank you, whatever. And I want to make sure that people understand, first of all, it's not like it's just me, right? There's people, my brother, Trisha's people behind the scenes of everything that are doing a lot of work. But then, just as important is the facts of you, right? Like the things I learned from you, how to carry myself and things of that sort, and just to mentor and to try to have a heart to be willing to help people, and a million different things I've learned from you, a million things I learned from, Dr. Ingram, like just think how we learn from those coming in front of us, and we try to do the best for those coming after us. But it should always be remembered, like this I don't want this model to ever go away. People looking up to the people who helped them get to where they're going, and always giving thanks. Because I'll say that a million times, so I that right. I want to make sure I thank you guys, and then paying it forward to get other people, to where they want to get to in the future. I've gone a little bit longer than I anticipated on going, but let me ask you this really fast, right? So you've got a young black boy, young black girl, listen to this episode right now. What single piece of advice would you want to give them?
You can do it. You can do it. But you have to have your own narrative in your head and not listen to the naysayers. Because the naysayers are only there to make you pause and to get you off track and to get you distracted. It's just like racism. They're going to throw racism at you. They start calling you names and disrespecting you. And they all are doing that so that you will lose your mind while they laugh at you. Right? Maintain your composure. Know who you are. Know whose you are. And understand that, no good thing would the Father start that he will not see to fruition. And if you keep your hand in the Master's hand, there's no telling where you'll end up. But it will be good.
Amen, amen. All right, listeners, we're going to bring this on home. Two quick things. Number one, hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, right? So go ahead, take a moment, click that button. We're trying to grow the channel. We're trying to get these videos out to more and more people so we can have a bigger, larger, greater impact across the whole country and the entire world. First thing. Second thing is, at the end of this video, YouTube's going to show you some other videos of things that you will like. YouTube knows what you watch. So go ahead and click on that video, because if YouTube is showing it to you, you're probably going to like that video. Now, I want to end this episode by asking my dear mentor, one of my great mentors, Cedric Bright, not Cedric Black either, not Cedric Black, Dr. Cedric Bright, to end this episode by looking in the camera and saying, my name is Dr. Cedric Bright, and I am a black man in a white coat.
Dale, it certainly has been a pleasure to be with you today. And I wanted to thank you publicly for allowing me to be the third person who did your film, that did your videos, vignettes. And I am Dr. Cedric Bright, and I am a black man in a white coat.
Really got them Rex, ain't playing around. When I go get it, stop playing around. Really got them Rex, ain't playing around. Black men, white coat, shit, we up right now, yeah. You gotta set you a goal. You gotta accomplish your